Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet, read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called The Bone Debt, written by Dark Prince 010. All right, kiddo, I said as my little one bounced up in bed with excitement. What story do you want me to read you tonight? I continued to thumb my fingers over the array of well-worn book spines in the small shelf in their room, but I knew what they were going to ask for anyways.
Tell me another story about the bones and the aliens, Daddy.
I smiled. It had been the story most requested over the last few months, for understandable reasons. Snuggling up against me and putting their blanket tight to their chin, they turned, happily snuggling their face into my chest, before closing their eyes and patiently waiting and listening. All right, let's see. About 1,500 years ago, a great and powerful alien hive species arose and started an intergalactic war. The other spacefaring races at the time managed to fight them to a standstill at a terrible cost. The aliens, my little one cut in,
The Hawk-Hack?
I smiled at the pronunciation. It was definitely simplified, and something that probably would have been offensive to an actual member of the species, as the name was pronounced with a series of guttural growls and gasps. But it was close enough for a 7-year-old. Yes, the Hawk-Hack had agreed to the ceasefire with the warning that their species would return to expand again, as their philosophy demanded in 1,000 years. Their hive mind was suspected to be a silica-based structure, one that had trouble changing old paths and old ideas. So in the times after that, the millennium of rest, the Hawk-Hack gradually became expert lawyers, judges, and decision-makers, thanks to being so impartial and unwaveringly strict.
And that's when we came in, right, Daddy?
Chuckling, I said, That's right, kiddo. That's when humans first met the Galactic Council about a century or so back. We had managed to finally get out of the old solar system with some faster-than-light drives and were, with some hesitation, welcomed into the wider galactic community, even though I think a lot of them still see us as a little bit of backwater hicks.
What's a hick, Daddy?
It's not a very nice term for someone you think isn't as clever as you.
Oh, well, that was before they knew about what we can help, right, Daddy?
I nodded. Yep. So it was only a decade or so before the Hive was set to revert and attempt to be galactic rulers. Of course, a lot changes in 1,000 years, and all but the most conservative among them did not seek to wage open warfare straight away. They realized that it may be possible to satisfy their psychological drive to be seen as rulers without actually conquering again. So apparently, their philosophers had mused for several centuries on how best to do this, and the proposal they put forth to the Galactic Tribune was one that they had carefully considered, apart from the brand new humans, of course. They had demanded that for every individual of every species, the Hawk-Hack must be given a bone or equivalent structural organ undamaged in order to pay the tribute and ensure the hive mind's peace. At the time, the other races were panicking over this, as almost no other species that possesses bones has any redundant ones. There was talk of having to sever secondary limbs or perform major surgical extractions across the entire species in order to pay for the Hawk-Hack's peace.
But we could help them out with that, right, Daddy?
I rubbed his head. That's right, kiddo. We had some interesting suggestions to offer, and it turns out that the Hawk-Hack are, unfortunately for them, stringent enough under their own rules that they couldn't change the terms of the conditions afterwards. And so, that's where you come in. Did you clean it off good? My child beamed, holding out the fist that they had clenched in the entire story.
Yep, it's my pointy one up on the top.
They held out their hand, revealing a tiny enameled tooth, before dropping it into my hand.
Do you know what they used to do with teeth back before we met the Hawk-Hacks?
They asked. Well, there was a myth about fae or elven creatures that would pay for teeth back in the day. But in those days, it was just parents telling made-up stories for their kids, and usually giving them a few credits worth of money, saying that it was from the fairy creature. Their smile was still wide as they yawned and curled into my arms.
That's silly, Daddy.
I thought they'd fully fallen asleep, but then came a little murmur.
Say hi to the tooth alien for me.
Of course, kiddo. Sweet dreams. I gave them a kiss on the forehead. Soon the sounds of gentle snoring could be heard as they fell into deep sleep, and I stood up and transferred them across the house into their bed. On my way out and back to the living room, I pulled up my communicator and keyed an icon, hailing one of the hawk-hacks for a debt payment. Sure enough, maybe half a cycle later, one of the aliens had keyed up the door chime. I went out to greet them, looking up at the hulking creature. Their bodies looked like the worst parts of a lizard and a bug had been combined, covered with a shawl made of brightly colored metallic fabrics and intricate abstract patterns. Its head was posed in what I now understand to be a sign of restrained deference, and the closest set of claws awkwardly held a much too small datapad, which it held up to read a name off in halting English. "Yep, that's me," I said. "Or rather, my offspring's name. They're asleep right now, but have authorized me to deliver this on their behalf." I held out a closed fist with the tooth, and the creature opened an ornate gilded flask it held on its hip. Within, I could hear the gravelly ceramic sound of hundreds of other teeth, as I dropped dowels onto the top. Then the alien passed me the datapad, clearly grateful it did not have to try and work the small screen with its large talons. I scrolled to the top of the list, marveling at the figures I was seeing. Humans had long since paid their own bone debt, but thanks to having an additional 20-odd teeth lying around, it meant that we were also happy to pay the debts of many, many other species. In fact, I could see the indicator showed that this individual, with a name that I couldn't hope to pronounce without splitting my tongue in half, was indicated to be a member of the 47th planet that humanity had helped this way. I hit the indicator for the name, and a string of Harkak runes flashed across in front, something I could barely make out reading "Debt Paid." There was also a simultaneous chime from my own pocket communicator. I knew it was payment for the tooth, drawn from the intergalactic fund of donations from species grateful to not have to part with their own limbs or be sliced open or carved up to pay the debt. When I had first asked my child, "Do you want to see how much you got for your tooth?" they had bounced up on the bed excitedly. "Yeah!" The tooth had been lost and submitted the week before, but intergalactic commerce being what it was, the payment had taken a little longer to process. Still, when I brought up on the screen, their eyes grew wide. "Wow, Daddy, that's a lot of zeros." It certainly beat a few metal coins tucked under a pillow, in my opinion. I passed the datapad back, and the Harkak representative took it with a passive grunt. It was at this point my curiosity got the better of my common sense, and I addressed the alien as it started to walk away. "Don't your people ever regret making the treaty with such a large loophole in it?" I asked. The Harkak looked taken aback, but then pondered the question for a moment. I wasn't sure if this was an individual speaking alone or the entire hive speaking through a mere vessel, but it took a moment either way to compose a response before saying, "In all honesty, what in the corpse-rotting underworld were we going to do with trillions of huge bones?" it said. I could tell that he was referencing at least 6 of the other intelligent species, who were more on the scale of Earth whales in terms of body size, and had bone clusters fully the size of small transport vehicles. The alien held up a flask and rattled the contents once again. "All in all, you humans have saved us both a war and storage problem. I'd say that we got the good end of the bargain." End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Dragon Soup, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Red Panda 121, Leslie 517, Bushmaster 177, Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Sans the Skeleton, Light Jock, Dragzoon WRE, and Lord Azrakal. Thank you very much.